I managed to finally watch the TWA Flight 800 documentary. And the first thing I'll say is that I kind of didn't find it as simple to watch or as interesting as the Zeitgeist films that were put together by Peter Joseph. Basically, the way that the Zeitgeist films threw information together and presented them, I felt it was slightly better. But anyway, as for the actual content of the documentary, one of the things that I noticed they brought up in the film the how the government basically strong armed everybody, and in a time when you didn't have the internet or YouTube available, it was very difficult for people to actually communicate the fact that supposedly the government was strong arming people together. Like, for instance, you wouldn't have had anybody sitting there with a secret video camera recording what was going on and then suddenly being able to post it to a YouTube because this happened back in the 90s. So it would have really helped the case that is being made if somebody could have done that, like the people who are constantly recording police officers saying unconstitutional things to citizens now. Well, be that as it may, the documentary was very believable, and I find it very difficult to understand how there's any possible way that a bunch of witnesses in a bunch of different locations could all see a very similar thing at the exact same time and then all report on something very similarly and testify that they in vivid detail what they saw, and then have all of these witnesses strong-armed by the government, which, that really makes it appear that what actually happened to TWA Flight 800 was that it was probably shot down by some type of Navy-based or some type of ground-based missile defense system, possibly. One of the other things I noticed was, and I brought this up because I had made like a pre-watch little video on YouTube like a couple of days back. One of the women had testified that she saw a missile fly towards the plane and it never actually hit the plane, but it got near enough to explode. And then I heard more testimony that said that the plane's wing was shredded. And when the plane's wing was shredded, it started leaking fuel, which vaporized, and it left behind a white plume of smoke. And then basically the plane burst into flames and started coming apart. That is pretty much what I predicted what would happen if a missile actually hit a plane. Because the problem is, a lot of people who've seen dogfights in movies, they believe that if a missile hits a plane, it just blows up the entire plane and shatters the airframe. In reality, what a missile does, especially if it has a proximity fuse, is a missile gets near enough to a plane to explode and damage it with shrapnel, and tearing the plane apart, the aerodynamic forces then acting on the plane help to destroy the plane even more. So I found that very, very interesting that this woman testified something which I had actually hypothesized. I found that very interesting, making the film very believable in my opinion. So ultimately, it's so many years past the TWA incident on Flight 800. It's so many years past it that you'll never be able to get enough evidence. You'll never be able to get anybody to really testify besides the witnesses. So unfortunately, even if this was a missile launch by the U.S. Department of Defense that went wrong, ultimately, it's not going anywhere. There'll be no real investigation. You see how quickly they covered everything up. If this was that, an investigation's not going to go anywhere. And even if it did go somewhere, who are they going to indict? Who are they going to impeach? And you can bet that there's going to be basically nobody who can actually come forward and say that this is what happened for certain. So unfortunately, if that is what happened, if TWA Flight 800 was accidentally shot down, if it was all covered up in order to protect the aviation industry from suffering from people boycotting it because they're scared of air flight, if it was a situation where, if it was just an accident, unfortunately, we're never going to know the truth. And as Americans, we're going to have to keep living with the fact that we have a situation where our government can cover things up, and even though we're paying our taxes, if they feel that it's too sensitive for us to know it, they're not going to let us know it. Which also brings up another question I had. Why is it that older people, especially American taxpayers, don't get to see bin Laden's body? How is it that they could go after bin Laden, grab him, bring him back, dead supposedly, and not show his body to the American people after how much destruction and damage he was alleged to have done? I'm an American citizen. I pay my taxes. I deserve the truth.